Today on the Inside Scoop, Auburn versus Alabama recruiting battles, Clemson's most important targets in 2024. But first, we're going to talk a little Florida State as the Seminoles start to heat up on the recruiting trail. Let's bring on national recruiting analyst Sam Spiegelman to talk Florida State. In 2023, Florida State finished with the 18th ranked recruiting class. Now, they did clean up in the transfer portal, but they really want to recruit the high school level better, and they're already off to a great start in 2024. Mike Norvell has FSU inside the top 10 already, and they are hot. Sam, I wanted to talk to you. Who's your favorite commitment in Florida State's current class?
Yeah, this might be an obvious one to go for the quarterback, but to be honest, I actually created Luke Kromenhoek's profile when I was working for a different media site out of Savannah, Georgia, and you see it. He kind of, I saw him starting, which is obviously, as an underclassman, his arm was spectacular, but you saw what he did as a junior. The accuracy, the touchdown field, his timing, the patience in the pocket. He can really get out of the pocket. For a right-handed quarterback, he's really good throwing to his right, but also to his left, which is really impressive. I think he's aggressive, attacking single coverage. I thought the tape spoke for itself, and he had a major rankings boost as a result. But if you're Florida State, this is the guy you want to build your class around, and I think it's great to have him in the class so early on, heading into these junior days.
Yeah, and we're high on him here at On3. He's an outlier compared to the rest of the industry. Charles Power, director of scouting and rankings here, ranks him as the number 5 quarterback nationally and the 59th best player overall, whereas the industry ranks him a little bit higher as the 9th best QB and the number 113th best player overall. We still expect him to rise in the rankings because he didn't even play really as a sophomore. He was behind Holden Grenier, who signed with Auburn. And last year was really Luke's first year starting at quarterback. So let's move on and talk a little bit more about FSU's top targets in 2024. Looking at the list here, you got 5-star wide receiver JoJo Trader, 5-star offensive tackle Jonathan Daniels, 4-star corner Charles Lester III, and 4-star edge Dylan Stevenson. Starting it with JoJo Trader, he's the number 4 wide receiver in America, number 14 overall. Really, right now, it's an in-state battle between Miami and FSU, although UF and Ohio State are also heavily involved. And remember, his teammate, Jeremiah Smith, is committed to the Buckeyes already. So he's been to FSU a few times. Right now, the key with JoJo Trader is just going to continue to get him on campus. He's out of Hollywood, Florida. He's an in-state target, and he's very familiar with FSU, but his recruitment's not even nearing the end. So get him on campus in the spring, bring him back in the summer for either an official or unofficial, and then, the key is those 3 visits. You got spring, summer, and again in the fall. I think that's what FSU needs for JoJo Trader. All right, Sam, tell me more about 5-star offensive tackle Jonathan Daniels.
Yeah, well, you talked about the importance of visits, and Jonathan Daniels, a top 10 player in the country and on 3, has visited Florida State more than any other campus. Being in Pensacola, Tallahassee is not a far drive. The biggest competition right now is LSU and Georgia. Like Florida State, LSU is a short drive away, and he's just coming off a visit to Georgia. But you think about this. Alex Atkins, obviously, he's also the O-line coach, but he's also the offensive coordinator, has built a really strong foundation with Jonathan Daniels. I think that he's going to head back later in March. You talk about another visit, another opportunity to show what they've built there. They just made him a priority, and he's a kid that, while he's so elite on the field and so fun to watch as an offensive tackle, when it comes to the recruiting side of things, I think he's putting more of an emphasis on the personal relationships. And in that regard, both Alex Atkins and Mike Norvell have really come through in a big way. And getting him on campus after he goes and sees an out-of-state school like LSU is going to loom really large for them down the road.
The next name on the list is somebody that you're really familiar with. 4-star cornerback Charles Lester III. You've been doing a lot of reporting on him throughout the spring, talking about different teams. But what's your feel for where he stands with Florida State?
You and I have spoken about Charles Lester a good amount, and for good reason. I think he's kind of the no-brainer elite DB in the state of Florida this year. I think he's a prototype at the position. For much of his recruitment, I believe that Florida State has been kind of the team trending with Charles Lester. At this point, he has every option to choose from, but he's focused in on Florida State Alabama, and Georgia. He's still going to visit Ohio State next month. There's a chance he heads back to Florida, which under Corey Raymond is continuing to recruit him for good reason. But it seems like it's Alabama, Georgia, and Florida State, and you like where Florida State stands heading into a really big visit this month. He's going to meet with Pat Surtain, the new DB coach in Tallahassee. Pat Surtain has a professional background as a player. We know he coached his son, who was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. He knows what it's going to take. I think if that relationship hits off, then Florida State could beat out national contenders like Alabama and Georgia. But those are the biggest competitors for the Noles right now.
Next up on the list, we got four-star edge Dylan Stevenson. This is another Miami FSU battle, and Stevenson attends Columbus High School, so this is pretty special because that's where Mario Cristobal also went to high school, and he's making him a major priority. He's been to FSU 3 or 4 times already. He'll likely take an official visit as well, so there's still time in this recruitment. You also got Auburn, who he's going to visit in mid-March on an unofficial. Right now, though, Miami leads on the recruiting prediction machine, but we'll see how things look after some of these spring visits play themselves out. All right, now we've been talking real high on Florida State, but we got to also watch out for these flips, And one guy that I'm watching is 4-star running back Cam Davis, the number 2 running back in America. Sam, he was actually committed to the Seminoles his freshman year back in 2021, but he's recently come out, told Chad Simmons that he's going to take visits to UGA, Colorado, LSU, Texas A&M, and of course, Florida State. So Sam, what's your feel on the Georgia running back right now?
It's great when you have someone like Cam Davis, a top 50 player in the country, one of those few elite backs that you can kind of build an offense around at the college level, and he's committed since, like you said, he's a freshman going into this year. Now his recruitment is really going to come full circle. We're going to really see what teams are interested and where he's interested in. And I like where Florida State stands. Yeah, they have an early commitment, but he's already mentioned he wants to go see Colorado. That's a team that you're very familiar with, Josh. He wants to go see LSU. And then I really would keep an eye out on Georgia here. I think this will ultimately kind of boil down to Florida State holding on against the in-state team. Del McGee in Georgia obviously have a strong reputation at that position. He's an in-state kid, but again, Mike Norvell has done a really good job of getting this commitment early on. He's going to head back to Florida State, and they're recruiting at a way higher level than when he originally committed. So I like where Florida State stands, at least, as a contender till the end.
All right. You mentioned earlier that Pat Surtain is finally on campus in Tallahassee as Florida State's new defensive backs coach. We mentioned Charles Lester. He's going to take a visit to FSU here soon and meet Pat Surtain face-to-face for the first time. But you've also talked recently with Travaris Banks. Tell me about him and why his visit to FSU is going to be important.
Travaris Banks has been to a lot of schools, including Florida State and Tennessee in January, and he's going to head back to both of those schools coming up here over the next 2 months. He told us that he's going to be committing on June 18th, so these visits loom particularly as he moves closer and closer toward that decision. And it seems like Florida State right now is the team to beat with Banks out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. But that also is before Pat Surtain was hired. So this visit does loom very large, and continuing Florida State's momentum with Travaris Banks. And another team to watch would be Tennessee. He's planning to get there this spring. He's been to Auburn. He wants to try to get to Mississippi State. And he's also set to visit Oklahoma. So he's set to see some of these final group of schools before he makes the decision. But the Noles are probably the team to watch entering this visit coming up.
All right. Florida State's also going to try to be aggressive on the recruiting trail as well and see if they can flip a couple recruits from their current commitments. Flip candidates that I'm taking a look at are 5-star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, 4-star tight end Landon Thomas, and 4-star defensive lineman Omar White. When it comes to 5-star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, he's committed to Ohio State, but has taken a couple trips to Tallahassee and probably will continue to throughout the summer and into the fall. He's not going to be an easy flip, but if Florida State wants to, they need to stay in his recruitment, get those points of contact in the spring, again in the summer, and then go for a late flip. It's never going to be easy to flip somebody, a wide receiver especially, that's committed to Ohio State because of the production that they get out there in Columbus, but FSU is an in-state program, and if Jeremiah Smith wants to stay close to home, FSU is going to have a spot there available for him. Let's move on to 4-star tight end Landon Thomas, the number 1 tight end in America. He's committed to Georgia, but Sam, why are you giving FSU a chance here?
We talked about this off air. At one point, he was committed to Florida State. Since then, obviously, he's committed to Georgia, but Florida State is in line for a visit this spring. They seem privy to continuing to recruit him till the end. Moving him off of that Georgia pledge might be hard. You know, it's not often that kids want to decommit multiple times in their recruitment, but like we said earlier, an early commitment only means so much, and we're going into the focal point of his recruitment. Georgia has a strong track record with tight ends, especially with Brock Bowers lately being a legitimate Heisman candidate at the position. I keep an eye on Florida State. They've been there before, and they'll be there until the end.
All right, and the third name I'm keeping an eye on is four-star defensive lineman Omar White, committed to the Colorado Buffaloes, but Omar is from Valdosta, Georgia, only about an hour from Tallahassee. He's made multiple visits to Florida State, but committed to the Buffaloes about a month ago. One of the best defensive linemen within about a 100-mile radius of Tallahassee, so I fully expect FSU to stay involved there. Sam? Thanks for talking a little FSU with me. Humor me a little bit. We talk about my team. Thank you. It's no secret that Alabama has controlled the Iron Bowl rivalry both on the field and on the recruiting trail in recent years. While Auburn is kind of muddled along under Brian Harsin, Nick Saban has been stacking #1 recruiting classes in the past 3 years. Now enter Hugh Freeze, one of the few coaches to get the better of Saban in both regards, dating back to his time at Ole Miss. The new Tigers head man closed out the 2023 recruiting cycle strong, moving Auburn within spitting distance of a top 15 class after taking over one that ranked in the 50s nationally. 2024 is the first chance for these two coaches to really go head-to-head on the recruiting trail, and they're doing exactly that already. Here's 5 recruitments that have both programs heavily involved. Let's look at these Alabama-Auburn recruiting battles. Linebacker Sterling Dixon, edge Jordan Ross, wide receiver Perry Thompson, wide receiver Cam Coleman, and athlete Daniel Hill. All right, let's bring on Director of Recruiting here at On3, Chad Simmons, to start talking about some Alabama-Auburn recruiting battles early in the cycle. Let's start with linebacker Sterling Dixon. Now, Chad, he's been committed to Alabama since December, but Auburn's all over him, and he already visited Auburn in January, and I think he's going to go back this spring. So early on, which way you leaning on Sterling Dixon, Alabama commitment?
Yeah, I have to lean towards him staying with Alabama right now, Josh. Obviously, there's been some changeover on the defensive side of the ball at Alabama, giving Auburn maybe a little bit of a cracked door to kind of jump in this race. And the new staff has, like you said, coming very aggressive after the talent out of Mobile, Alabama. But right now, I do like where Alabama sits as the commitment and as the leader, and really to hang on to Sterling Dixon.
All right, 4-star edge Jordan Ross. He's 6'5", 215-pound pass rusher out of Birmingham, Alabama, the number 6 edge in the country. He's uncommitted. Which way you leaning on this recruitment?
I think there's a little bit of frustration with Ross, being that Bama offered him a little bit later than some other schools did. And I think I go Auburn this way because of that. There's a big visit this weekend with Ross going to Tuscaloosa. If things go well, things could swing a little bit. But right now, I like where Auburn is better than Alabama.
All right, 4-star wide receiver Perry Thompson, another current Alabama commitment, pledging to the Tide about 7 months ago in June, but that was before his recruitment really blew up and before the Tigers got involved. Now, he also visited Auburn in January. Is his recruitment in flux? Who are you leaning towards?
This one was fun about a month and a half ago. Went to Auburn mid-January. Came out of that saying he was about 60% committed to Alabama. Since that visit, Bama's been on him pretty hard. He's backed off that statement, saying he's a little bit more stronger committed to Alabama. I think Auburn will be a threat to Alabama all the way through, but right now I lean still towards Alabama for the talented wide receiver.
All right, got you down for Alabama. Now we're moving on to wide receiver Cam Coleman. He's out of Phoenix City, Alabama, 6'3", 205-pound, big-bodied wide receiver. Chad, which way you leaning?
I mean, with Bama's success at receiver in recent years with Waddle and Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy, and the list goes on, hard to go against them. Obviously, Hugh Freeze has a high-powered offense. They got to get the quarterback in place and get the offense going. So right now I'm going with Holman Wiggins Tommy Rees, and Nick Saban at Alabama for Cam Coleman.
All right, guys, do me a favor right now before we finish this list. Hit the subscribe button to the On3 YouTube page. We've got all the latest recruiting developments and a ton of college football content. Right now, hit subscribe. Thank you. All right, the last one. We're moving out of the state of Alabama. We're going all the way to the state of Mississippi to find athlete Daniel Hill. He's out of Meridian, 6'2", 220 pounds. Chad, which way you leaning?
Hard to go against Bama here, Josh. He's been there over half a dozen times already, yet to visit Auburn. He plans to be there sometime this spring. He thought he'd get there in January, didn't make it. Maybe March is the month Auburn gets him on campus. They're definitely in the mix, but hard again to go against Bama, a place he and his family are so familiar with right now early on.
Yeah, early in this cycle, it's hard to go against Alabama in any recruitment, let alone against Auburn. Chad, we're going to circle back on some of these in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining the Inside Scoop. Despite a less than stellar season by Clemson standards, the Tigers were still able to finish with a top 10 recruiting class in the 23 cycle. Now Dabo Swinney and his staff have shifted their focus to 2024. But before Clemson kicks into high gear on the recruiting trail, I want to bring on Jeremy Johnson of On3 to discuss Clemson's top recruiting targets for the 2024 cycle. Absolute studs on this list. Let's take a look here. 5-star wide receiver Mike Matthews, 5-star safety KJ Bolden, 5-star linebacker Sammy Brown, 4-star defensive lineman Heaven Brown Schuler, and 4-star quarterback Air Noland. All right, Jeremy, let's start right at the top. 5-star wide receiver Mike Matthews, 6'1", 180 pounds, out of the state of Georgia. What are you hearing when it comes to his recruitment to Clemson?
Yeah, I spoke with him the other day, and he really likes Clemson. They are, likely to get a official visit, though he hasn't decided on that as of now. But, they seem to be one of those top 2 or 3 programs that are, going to be in this recruitment, throughout the process. He, really likes their culture. The opportunity to play early is, something up there for him as well. I feel like, Clemson will be in this race, throughout the whole process.
All right, moving on to 5-star safety KJ Bolden. He's out of Buford, Georgia, the #1 safety in America and the #3 overall prospect. Jeremy, why is he so important to Clemson's recruiting class this cycle?
Well, he's a big-time player. He can play both sides of the football. He's a big-time athlete. He's one of those guys that's an impact player on either side, and I think Clemson has circled him as one of the guys that they must have in this class. I know he's, close with the staff over there. Mickey Khan's a Georgia guy. So I think, I believe he's a South Carolina native too. So he has a lot of family in South Carolina. So, I feel like they'll be one of the top 2 or 3 programs in the recruitment for him as well. Obviously, Georgia and Ohio State are programs that you kind of hear a lot about as well with him. So, they're going to have to battle for him. But, I think Clemson has a legitimate shot to eventually land KJ Bolden.
All right, moving on to 5-star linebacker Sammy Brown. Another one of these battleground recruitments. He's out of Jefferson, Georgia. The =1 linebacker in America, the #13 prospect overall. What are Clemson's chances to land Sammy Brown?
I say they're pretty high. I say they're pretty high. He's got some other visits that he's probably going to take. Oklahoma, Notre Dame's probably in there as well. But, you hear the most about Clemson and Georgia. It feels like those are going to be the 2 that battle it out. Obviously, he's in Jefferson, which is about 35, 40 minutes, maybe not even that far from Athens. So, he's grown up right there in the shadow of Sanford Stadium, and he's got a teammate, Malachi Starks, that plays for them. He's going to be hard to pry away from them, but also Clemson has a lot of positives, the culture, early playing time for them, and just some of the ties that he has, in South Carolina. I think his dad played college football over at Furman. So, he's got some ties there. And, I really think Clemson has a really good shot in this race. I really think he fits, just their defense and their culture. So I think that's it. Clemson's definitely one to watch in this recruitment.
All right, let's go to the Atlanta area where we got 4-star defensive lineman Heaven Brown Schuler, 6'2.5", 300 pounds, #113 prospect overall. Jeremy, where do the Clemson Tigers stand for Heaven Brown Schuler?
I definitely say they sit near the top in that recruitment. Just, he's been there so much. He loves the culture, and he's a good fit for the culture. He's coming from Pace Academy, a really highly academic school in Atlanta. So I know that he and his family really value the education, and Clemson has an opportunity, gives him an opportunity to kind of, mold that culture and, some of that faith that he has and, the high academics. And he also loves Coach Eason. So they've already gotten a defensive tackle in Champ Thompson in the class of 24, putting him in there next to him will be big for them. I think he will. I don't know if he's got an official visit set up with them yet. I'm sure he'll get back over there soon. I feel like South Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia are the teams that you're going to have to beat out to land him, down the road.
All right, before we get to quarterback Air Noland, Clemson fans, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. We're doing something special here at On3, and we need your help to grow it. Subscribe to the On3 YouTube page. Thank you. All right, Jeremy, 4-star quarterback Air Noland, very intriguing name, climbing up a lot of recruiting boards this offseason. He's out of Fairborn, Georgia, 6'3", 195 pounds, the number 8 overall quarterback in America. What is going on with his recruitment to Clemson right now?
Yeah, he'll get on campus here soon, and I feel like there's potential for an offer there. We don't know that yet, but I think him and Coach Riley have had some discussions, and he fits what they do over there. If you're basing what Clemson will do, if it's anything like what TCU did, he has a big arm. He's a mobile guy. He can throw. He plays in a spread offense in high school, so it's a natural fit. If they're looking towards kind of doing the same stuff that they did at TCU, I know he's had communication with Coach Riley. He'll be there on the 10th, I believe, and he's another guy that fits that Clemson mold, that Clemson culture. The guy carries a notebook with him everywhere he goes. He's one of those sponge type quarterbacks. And, I think, he'll get in the room with those guys and I think they'll fall in love with him. So we'll see how that visit goes and we'll see what happens moving forward. But if Clemson were to offer, I do feel like they would be, one of the programs really in that race for him, down the stretch.
It's early in the recruiting cycle, but fans want to know, what's the biggest position of need for Clemson this cycle?
I think I had trouble kind of thinking about this. I think there's 2 positions. I think there's running back who, Clemson just landed a 4-star running back, but, I'm not going to take the running back off the board there because I do feel like, they got 2 guys in 2023 and you had 2 guys that are playing for you right now, Phil Maffa and Will Shipley, but those guys will eventually move on. So you got to find guys that can come in and replace those guys. They obviously got David Izu-Mume today, or earlier in the week. So just, I think they'll eventually offer another running back, and I do think they'll probably end up getting another running back down the stretch. And, I'm not sure who that will be at this point, but, there's a couple guys they're taking looks at, and a couple guys that will be on campus in the next couple of weeks that will be, guys to watch, and for Clemson. And I'm going to say wide receiver because – they just need that one really big play guy, that difference. They have Joseph Ngata, but eventually he'll move on and go play in the NFL and have a long career. But you just, they've got the quarterbacks and they're going to move into this more spread, wide open attacking system. And you need the dudes to be able to go and make those big plays. And I think, that's a position of need. And I think they're going to get really aggressive here over the next few months and trying to make sure that they, add some of those guys that can go and run that system for Coach Riley.
All right, the fans want to know, Jeremy Johnson, who is the most important recruit for Clemson in the 2024 cycle?
I'm gonna keep the theme going with the wide receivers. I'm gonna say Mike Matthews, just because what we just said. You need that difference maker. You need that big play threat. Mike Matthews is a little bit of all of that. He can go up and get the football. He can go and he can stretch you vertically. He can catch you underneath. He's one of those complete type receivers, and he's a guy that fits their culture. So he'll go in there and he'll work hard and he'll play early and he'll be really successful if they were able to land him. And he's one of those highly ranked guys that Clemson really needs that splash at the skill position spot, especially with the quarterback positions. They've landed a couple big time quarterbacks over the last few years, and I think that'll help them with some of these guys that they're recruiting, like an Air Noland or anybody else that they get in the race for late in the process.
Yeah, Dabo needs that big-time playmaker on offense. He's definitely lacking that. Jeremy, thanks for checking in with us today on the Inside Scoop. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me. And remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.